chapter 10. There's a story that was told about Franklin Roosevelt, and I can assure you that I was not around to hear that one. But there is a story that's told about him that he often endured long receiving lines in the White House. Now I can understand that because as a minister, sometimes we do receiving lines at the door, and they can be quite long. In fact, I have one of my favorite memories happened to the pastor that was my pastor growing up. And one particular day, there was a large church, there were about several hundred people who were leaving, and he happened to have a bear out of the cave as he was in the receiving line. You guys don't know what that phrase means, do you? He had a bear hanging out of the cave. As he stood in the receiving line, and everyone went by him, no one had the courage to tell him, what was going on, until about 3/4 of the people were through, and finally said, Pastor, you need a tissue. He's like, oh, okay. But these long receiving lines, you go through, you talk to people, and you don't really listen, and that was, President Roosevelt's concern. And so he's standing there with this long receiving line, and he complains that no one listens to anything that is said. No one really listens to me. And so during one day, he decided to do a little trial, a little experiment to see if anyone listened to him. And so as the guest started to go through and shook his hand, he murmured, I murdered my grandmother this morning. Guess how the guest responded? Marvelous! Keep up the good work! We are proud of you! God bless you, sir. Every time they went through, I murdered my grandmother this morning. And they were as thrilled as could be. It was not until the end of the line, while greeting the ambassador of Bolivia, that someone actually heard his words. And the ambassador leaned in closer and said, I'm sure she deserved it, sir. You will think about that and laugh later, hopefully. Hey, with that in mind, let's turn to our scripture. Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. Now, to be honest with you, this is a passage that I absolutely love. It's a passage that I've preached from a number of times, and so I'm hoping that today is a little bit different because there are some things in there that I really want you to hear. Because today our sermon is really about listening. With the cross before us, with knowing that that day is ever approaching when we will meet Jesus, there are some things that we need to hear. In fact, I think we need to listen more. I don't know how many conversations I have had with people, family, friends, some of you, and I have walked away and had to think, what did we just talk about? Did you ever draw a blank right after that conversation? And I know why it happens. And I saw some wives pointing at their husbands. Yeah, just stretching, yeah. I know how it happens. We have so much going on that we don't really stop and listen. We don't really stop and pay attention. Now, this story is listed in the Gospel of Luke immediately after the parable of the Good Samaritan. That's a story that we know well, right? And at the end of that, Jesus gives remarkable words to the expert of the law. He says what? Go and do. Go and do likewise. Go and do what this Good Samaritan did for this man. Well, now we have Jesus saying something on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Here he is. He's gathered in the home with Martha and Mary. And the words that he says to Mary and to Martha are to stop and listen. Have you ever wondered, well, Jesus, which is it? Are we to go and do, or are we to stop and listen? You know what the answer is? Yes. Are we to go and do? Yes. Are we to stop and listen? Yes. So how do we do that well? Because I think most of us are really, really good at the going and doing. We have a lot of activity. We have a lot of things going on. In fact, I bet you do not have a shortage of things to do. Anyone have a shortage? You come see me, I will help you. I do not have a shortage. In fact, I have more than I can possibly do. We are very, very good at going and doing. And here Jesus reminds Martha, you know what? We also need to sit and listen. We also need to stop at times. Now you guys know that I love to go back and I love to try and put myself in the story and to really see what was going on there. If I could almost be a mouse in the room or somebody who's intimately involved in the setting to get a picture of how this was playing out. And so let's go back with me there for a moment. Here we are, we're in Martha's house. It probably looks very different than most of our homes today. Probably don't have the drywall. Probably don't have the nice floors. I'm thinking dirt. Maybe stone. We probably don't have the TVs hanging on the wall. All of the electronics. And I've got to tell you, with the electronics, it's been one of the great distractions. A rule that I have put into place that I thought I would never do, especially with an almost 5-year-old, is no electronics at the table. It's as much for me as it is Allie. Jen doesn't have a problem with it yet. I'm sure Alex will. None of the stuff that we typically have, they have. Very, very different setting. But they have something that we do have. There's a kitchen. And there's a room where everyone is gathered together. Now, when a lot of people come over to our house, that typically means lots of work, right? Someone's going to clean. Someone's going to cook. Someone's going to make sure that the toys are picked up so that you don't fall all over the place. And I hate to say it, but a lot of that work usually falls to moms, right? To women. Guys, we try to help. And I am good at helping and then making sure that Jen knows that I helped. I don't know if you guys can relate to that or not, but I did something. But there's all this work to be done when people come over. And that is something that doesn't change from now until the day when Jesus was walking around. There was tons of stuff to be done. And so here they are. Jesus has showed up. He's been welcomed into Martha's home. And I don't think Martha knew he was coming because the food wasn't ready. The house probably wasn't nearly as clean as she wanted it to be. And so Jesus comes in with his disciples, and Martha goes right to the kitchen. Now I can appreciate this because I'm married into a family with some of the best hospitality people I've ever met. My wife's family, man, they are amazing at make you feel at home. And the only times I've really gotten in trouble were the times that I didn't eat. Now imagine that. I didn't eat, and I got in trouble. Usually I get in trouble for eating. Different situations there. But they're excellent at making you feel at home and helping you feel like you really belong there. And I get that Martha was a really good person in hospitality. She understood it well. She knew what it took to feed people and to make them feel comfortable, to make them feel welcome, to help them relax so that they could do what they were doing. But usually the moment before everybody arrives, it's pretty chaotic in our house. We're trying to get all that last minute stuff done. And it gets just a wee bit tense. I don't know if you guys can relate to that. Just a little bit tense, and maybe there's some sharpness of words. Or, I thought you did this, no, you did that, a little bit of blame going around. And I love that as we read the Gospels, don't we see that with Martha? She is trying to get this done. She is trying to hurry up. She's caught a little bit off guard. She wants this to be set so that she can go and visit and make her guests feel welcome. And half of her workforce is missing. She's there. She's putting in everything she can do. But someone who is normally in the kitchen with her is MIA. And so she looks around and notices that Mary, not only is she missing, but she's sitting with the rest of the guests talking and listening to Jesus. And the conversation starts to ensue. Well, gee, Mary, I'd like to sit and talk with Jesus. I'd like to be out there, but can't you see the work that needs to be done? Can't you see the preparations that we need to have taken care of so that our guests feel welcome? And the longer she has this conversation, the louder it gets. The more angry I picture Martha becoming, because I have been there. And I like to think of Martha just making a few intentional glances at Mary. From the kitchen into the living area. And you know that look. You have either given or received that look. That look of, you are to be helping me right now, and you're not. And so I picture Martha giving that look to Mary. Right over her head. Totally doesn't get it, doesn't move. And so, step 2 goes into action. That's just a wee bit more noise in the kitchen than's necessary. You slam the doors, you move the pots a little louder, maybe you break something, hoping that it gets a bit of a reaction. No response. Mary either still is so engrossed in the conversation, or she doesn't care that she chooses not to move. And so finally, Martha is out of options. She has used all of the tools in her toolbox to get Mary's attention subtly, or not so subtly. The last thing she can do is to walk in and say to Jesus, Jesus, don't you care that she's not helping me? I am going and doing, Jesus, just like you said. I am going and doing. In fact, Jesus, I am serving you. Make her help me. Come on, Jesus, make her help me. And I've heard this story used so many times to condemn Martha at this point. To say how wrong she was in doing that. To say how wrong she was for trying to insist that Mary help her. Or to make Martha into the bad person. Martha wasn't the bad person. Martha was doing what every good hostess does. She was trying to make her guests feel at home. She was taking care of the people who were in her home. She had invited them in, she had received them, and she was doing her best to help them feel comfortable and to help them have a good time. And so I don't want you to hear that Martha is the bad person here, because I think that's the wrong message. I think Martha got caught up in busyness. She got caught up in all of the things that she had to do. All of the food that wasn't cooked that needed to be cooked. And we don't know if she wasn't planning on a large party. Maybe she was partly in the kitchen figuring out, how am I going to feed so many people? Because I sure wasn't planning on it. And that stress level starts to increase the longer she's in the kitchen trying to figure out how all of this is going to get done. She was stressed. And that is one of the major things that stops us from listening. When we get busy, when we get stressed, when we get focused on what we have to do, man, the first thing we do is shut off our ears because I can't take anymore. And I have done that so many times. It is easy. And as we go into that mindset, what happens is the internal dialogue just gets stronger and stronger. And I don't know about you, but when I am stressed, when I am tired, when I am hungry, when I am angry, man, I could throw an amazing pity party for me. It is the best or the worst. I don't know how you categorize that. But either way, it's really good. And I convinced myself by the end of it, I'm all by myself. No one really cares. If Mary cared, she'd be in here helping me. And that's what I see going on with Martha. My efforts aren't appreciated. Maybe others would just do a better job than I can do. It is easy to do this. And so I want you to stop, and I want you to go back to what Jesus finally tells Martha here about listening. He tells her to stop and listen, because I think listening is necessary. It's one of the first points I want you to take away. Listening is necessary, because here we have Martha. She has worked herself into a pity party. She's angry. She's upset. She's trying to get everything done, and she has totally missed all of her guests. Listening is necessary. Now, there is many things that are amazing about this passage, and one of them I don't think we often stop to appreciate. But Mary is doing something groundbreaking in her time, and so is Martha. Did you catch whose home Jesus was invited into? It was Martha's home. We don't think much about that today. But this was in a time when women didn't own property. In fact, when women were property. And Martha owned a home. And so here she is. You better believe she's going to do her best to take care of it. The second thing that's groundbreaking is that Mary was invited by Jesus to sit at his feet and learn. And women weren't invited to sit at the feet of rabbis, because that would make you a disciple. And there weren't female disciples. Yet what I love about the Gospel of Luke is that Luke makes it very clear to tell us that Jesus had female disciples. Women who sat and learned, and I think Luke chapter 8 is another reference to that. But here we have Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus learning. This is huge. This is not just playtime. This is not just catching up with friends. Jesus is sitting down and he is teaching the way he taught publicly on the hillsides. Now, we think of teaching as having a teacher in front of a classroom who's going to stand, who's going to lecture. That's our method of teaching. In biblical days, the method of teaching is the teacher would sit or recline around the table with the students. And it was a very interactive dialogue. But that the important truths were shared when you were sitting down, when you were reclining, so that you could really stop and focus and hear what's being said. And so we have two women in great roles. One a homeowner, one becoming a disciple of Jesus. And Jesus makes the same invitation to Martha. In fact, I think if we hear this, especially in light of our busyness, Jesus makes the same invitation to us. To sit and to become his disciples. To sit and listen. And it's an invitation to take a break from our busyness. It's an invitation to take a break from everything that is on our to-do list. It's an invitation to even take a break from serving Jesus. Now, that doesn't sound like something we say in church, and it sure doesn't sound like something a pastor should tell his congregation, that, okay, it's time to take a break from serving Jesus, right? It is if our intent is to stop and listen to Jesus. To stop and connect, to sit at his feet and to study. See, in my mind, Martha's kitchen, it was a really busy place. It was kind of like a nice restaurant kitchen. What's going to be happening this afternoon? Tons of pots going on, things everywhere. All of this work that is clamoring for her attention that needs to be done. And Jesus doesn't tell her to go in there and get everything finished. He doesn't send her help so that it's quickly finished. He instructs her to let it go and to sit down and listen. Imagine the puzzlement on Martha's face with Jesus' response. Wasn't what she anticipated at all. She expected Jesus to correct Mary's behavior, to get her moving back to the kitchen, helping her. And instead of correcting Mary, Jesus actually invites Martha to join her. And it's something that I think we all need to stop and hear. Listening is tough. In fact, listening forces us to do something that I don't think many of us do well. It forces us to slow down. It's my understanding that the average person can say 120 to 150 words a minute. Doesn't that sound like a lot? You're saying, no wonder I can't keep up with that. No. The same research says that we can listen or we can hear about 550 words per minute. We can hear 4 times as much as we can say, and most of the time we can't remember what we've heard. Think about that. We are able to process 4 times as much as we are able to say. It means that we should be listening a whole lot more than we typically do. But so often, especially if you're like me, I'm really good at talking. It's my job. I remind Jen of that at times. My job is to talk. And yet Jesus says we also need to listen. In fact, we are built in such a way that listening happens faster than actually talking does. I hope that you are starting to think now about some of the times in your life that you haven't listened to conversations. Or perhaps it's jogging some memories of things that have happened or occurred where you realize you weren't really paying attention, because it is so common that I think we just blow right by it. We stop, but don't even pay attention to it. And so here's one of the challenges that I want you to think about. If you can't remember partway through the conversation what the person is saying, maybe you just need to confess, you know what, I haven't really been listening. Let's try again. Now, isn't that going to be rough if you say to them, I wasn't really listening? That's going to be an awkward moment, isn't it? It is. But maybe it gives you the chance for some real dialogue. I do a fair amount of counseling, and with every couple that I work with, I make them do active listening skills. And they're like, why are we doing this? This is stupid. Evan said you guys can relate, right? And my response, and here's what we do. I have one person say something, and then I have the other person not be a parrot, but summarize it back. So you don't repeat everything word for word, but you give the summarization of what the other person just said. And I get the eye rolls, and people look at me like, I can't believe we're doing this. And my response is, if you can't do it here, you'll never do it at home. If we can't stop and intentionally listen at times, it will never just get better. If we want to be good listeners, it's something we're going to have to work at. As I've been thinking about this and dwelling on this all week, I think one of the reasons that social media has taken off so rapidly is that we're all looking for somebody to hear us. We're all looking for somebody to listen to our stories, to listen about some of the, let's say, meaningless parts of our day, some of the things that we just want to tell somebody, and we're hoping that somebody will click a like on our comment and say, yeah, I read that, or at least I skimmed it, or at least I'm giving you the impression that I care about what you're saying. For me, I like to put jokes on there. And I'm hoping that some of you smile. But we're looking for people who will listen to us. People who will hear our hearts. People who will respond and say, I hear you. And the reason I don't want to condemn Martha in this is because Jesus doesn't condemn her either. He says, Martha, you are frustrated. You are busy beyond belief. You are burdened. You are worried. You are stressed. And I hear you. I hear what you're saying, Martha. I can't just fix it. I'm not going to tell your sister to get up and just help you. But Martha, I'm listening to you. In fact, this is an amazing thing that Jesus does throughout the Gospels. Whenever he stops to heal someone, guess what he always does? He listens to them. Now, we don't ever pick up on that because we blow right by it in our own life. But no matter what is happening, when Jesus interacts with somebody personally, he listens to them. No matter how busy he is, no matter how much the crowd is pressing in on him, no matter how many other priorities he has, Jesus listens to them. And he listens to Martha. And he listens to us. I don't see any reason that Jesus' behavior on earth would change from where Jesus is now. And so when we bring our concerns to Jesus, he may not fix it. He may not answer it the way we want. In fact, he might tell us to stop. He might tell us to listen to him. But he will hear us. I don't know if there is anything more comforting to know. not only does Christ love us, not only would Christ die for us, he listens to us. And he listens to Martha, and then he invites her to become his disciple. To let go of everything else that distracts her, to let go of everything else that she is worried about, to let go of everything that has been causing all of this turmoil. And he says, I'm not taking this away. I absolutely love the fact that Jesus invites us to come and listen to him. He invites us to sit at his feet, to listen to his teachings, to become his disciples, to take on a completely different way of life, to become a chick rather than an egg. It's a great lesson, right? One of the ways we can be different as Christians is to listen. Imagine if we listened to people. The other part that I do is I listen to people as I counsel. And I've had people over the years that I'm convinced that all they really wanted was a friendly ear. All they really wanted was someone to say, I hear you, I'm listening to you. And guess what? We don't need amazing skills to be listeners. In fact, if your ears work, you're already qualified. You have the necessary hardware. Maybe we'll get you some software, we'll get you some good skills. And I'll give you some of the updates on that. You want to be a good listener? Try to repeat some of what they said back to you. Try to summarize it back. And husbands, this is great, because when I go to the store, I ask Jen, now you said we need this and this. And you know what it does? I actually have a better chance, I still get it wrong a lot, but I have a better chance of remembering when I go to get that stuff. Because when I slow down and stop talking for just a minute, and I listen, it helps me to remember. I'm convinced it's the reason that Jesus also invites Martha to slow down and listen to him. Giving her a chance to grow. A chance to become something that she was really meant to be. I don't think we were meant to be stressed out all the time, that we were expected to be worried about all the time, that we were expected to go, 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 because Jesus says go and do, yes, but he also says stop and listen. The only part that I wonder about this passage is, did Martha listen? Did Martha hear Jesus? Or did she just get mad because he didn't say, Mary, get in there? I wish Scripture told us. I wish we had the rest of the conversation. I wish we knew exactly what happened from this moment on. We don't know what Martha did, but we can decide for each one of us. If Jesus is inviting us to listen to him, and he is, and Jesus has listened to us, which he has, are we willing to stop and listen to him? It's the question that we have to wrestle with today. Are we willing to stop and to listen to Jesus? It's a tough question, isn't it? Because if I'm going to do that well, if I'm going to do that and my situation is like Martha, it means some of those boiling pots are just going to have to keep boiling. It means some of the meal that I had planned to make isn't going to be made. It means some of the cleaning that I planned to do isn't going to be done. It means some of the places I planned to go, I'm not going to go. It's not just about related to our house, it's related to our life. Some of the things that I plan to watch on TV, I'm not going to watch. That's one of mine. Are we willing to listen to Jesus? And as a side note, Are we willing to listen to our friends and our family, the people who we say we love most, and to help them be heard? I am convinced that there is no greater gift that we can give to one another than to listen to one another, and no greater gift that we can ever receive than the invitation from Jesus to listen to him. Let's close in prayer. Dear God, we just thank you for this time today. God, we thank you for this invitation from Jesus to come and listen, to sit at his feet, to become a disciple, to hear his message, to hear his teaching, to hear that we are loved, to hear that we are valued, to hear that you know our hearts and our burdens and our concerns. Father, help us to listen to you. Help us to hear your words, to follow the beckoning at our hearts, to put aside all of our busyness and to hear you. And Father, help us to hear those around us, our friends, our family, our loved ones, the people who drive us crazy, the people who just are looking for anyone who will listen. Help us to represent you well. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.